Good morning, everybody. So my name is Trace Nelson, and I'm back at it again this week for our weekly Black Food Folks Afropunk conversation series. We call it The Politics of Food. And I guess the last couple of weeks have been really brilliant. Hopefully, a lot of you have been following us week to week. And this week I'm so excited because we have the Reverend Dr. Heber Brown from the Black Church Food Security Network. He is an extraordinary person, and you all are going to be so excited and just empowered, and intrigued by his I don't know, his point of view and just the work he does in his ministry is really interesting. So let me see if I can find Dr. Brown. Let's see. Let's see. Trying to get Dr. Brown in. Go. Dr. Brown.
Hey, hey.
Good morning.
Hey, Chef. How you?
Doing really well. I'm appreciative of you taking time out this morning to talk with me.
Oh, please. This made I told all my family I got dressed. I went to the barber shop and held my breath so I can get a fresh cut. I'm on Afropunk. I done made it, mama.
Hey. Yeah, I saw you post about a potential costume change. Very silly, but I love it. And this is our 7th week doing these talks, and I feel like I knew about your work in Baltimore a little bit, maybe last year, but I had the honor and the pleasure of hearing your keynote speech at the Black Farmers Conference last year. And there's something so impactful about your youth, about the spirit of the work you do. You had a room full of very hardcore farmers and these sort of political activists in spiritual hymn at the end of your speech. And it told me everything I need to know about wanting to know more about your work. So I think in this moment, I listened to your message yesterday from Pleasant Hope, so about
you listened to the sermon yesterday.
I did. I absolutely did. It was so apropos about sort of how you shift ministry in a moment like this. How are you really built for this life? And so we have gotten some comments over the weeks about the through line of how we talk about food in the context of politics, but I find food to be this really interesting conduit for all things in my own work. And I feel like we really can't have a conversation about the work you do with the Black Church Food Security Network without really talking about your origin story and the specificity of Baltimore in your work. So just wondering if you could talk a bit about Baltimore, because I'm from Newark, New Jersey, a town very similar to Baltimore in its urban.
Wait a minute, you from Newark, New Jersey?
Yes, sir.
Brick City.
That's right. And so something about, and we also similar age, something about the generation we grew up in, being of such an urban town, just sort of where ministry became important to your life, your education, all those things. Just give people a taste of your origin story, because it's so important to the work you do now.
Wait a minute, Chef.
Hello? Dr. Brown? Let's see. Uh-oh.
Oh, no. Okay, sir? Chef, you there?
Okay. Yes.
Let me find out I'm going to be Teddy Riley this morning. I'm not doing it. Shout out to Teddy Riley. I'm not doing that.
You're not
So in terms of origin story, you know what, this is so interesting that I didn't know you were from Brick City. I didn't know you're from Newark.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of origin stories, my father, my aunts, my uncle, they grew up in Newark. My grandfather and grandmother started a church in Newark called Brown's Chapel Free Will Baptist Church. It's on
Okay.
Chancellor Ave, across from Week Wake High School.
Are you kidding me right now? I grew up on Hansbury Avenue, right there, like the next street over, only
Come
for a part of the
on.
block. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, so look, my grandfather and grandmother, Heber Brown Sr. and Beatrice Brown, my family, their house is on Kia Avenue. They grew up on Kia Avenue, right around the corner from
Same
Week Wake High
neighborhood.
School.
Same
Is
neighborhood.
that so? Look, isn't that for me? For me, that's such symbolic. It's so symbolic of these connections, right? And I'm glad you
Yeah.
raised that. That in doing this, and it's hard to call it work,
Mhm.
in being faithful to my vocation in this way.
Yeah.
Um, it has surprised me, and I don't even know why I'm still surprised, but it has shown me so many different connection points and links with people. And as much as we think, even in, as you said it, that hardcore farmer space at the Bugs conference, shout out to Karen Washington and the entire
Yeah.
Bugs family. That was an amazing experience. It felt like revival. By the time I left, the spirit was so high
Yeah.
up in there.
It was. It
Um,
was.
but I mean, it was just what we just did in talking about our roots and connections to Newark is what I felt in that room. It's like, the more that we might see the areas of beautiful distinction with respect to how we show up in the world, the more we can also see ways that we parallel, we link up, we intersect, we connect. I think we help to season each other in some very dynamic ways. And so I'm excited by that. And in terms of um, my origin story, I was born here in Baltimore. Um, I shared already about my paternal grandparents starting a church in Newark. My dad left Newark, came down here to Baltimore to go to school at the Morgan
Hey.
State University,
Hey.
HBCU in the house, and and so born here, my mother Patricia Main Brown and my daddy, they decided to go ahead and kick it. And I came out as a result here in Baltimore, grew up here in the city, um, going from church to church. I mean, we're classic PKs, preachers' kids, right? And so me, my brother Anthony, who's a gospel music artist,
Mm.
my other brothers, Jonathan, Jacob, we all grew up together going from church to church. We're preachers' kids. And Anthony and I in particular grew up singing at churches. As my daddy would go preach, he would have us come up before he would preach and say, I'm going to ask my sons to come up. We were called the Brown Boys. We're going to have the Brown Boys come up. So we would
Yeah.
come up and we would sing at, different churches. And that's how we grew up. I mean, we got the wonderful experience that so many people have had of growing up in church and getting opportunities to learn about public speaking. Like we ain't had no Toastmasters, we had church, right? And so so in terms of like confidence, in terms of like standing before others and like all of that, the Black church has just blessed my whole life in that way, and my whole family, all my brothers, my sister Kirsten, all of us. It has given us wonderful gifts in that respect. And then I go to Morgan State. The quick part of it is I go to Morgan State. Um, I earned a degree in psychology. Then I went to seminary at Virginia Union. And
Mm.
then later on, Wesley Theological Seminary. I was called to pastor this church called Pleasant Hope. And I didn't know you was in church yesterday, Chef.
That's
Um,
right.
so I pastored this church, and this is my 12th year pastoring the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. And along the way, the land started calling me. The land started calling me. And I'm sure we're going to dig deeper into it, but that's the short of kind of where I am in the world and how I got to this space.
Well, I mean, I appreciate that. I mean, I think reading your bio is one thing, but hearing it in your words is really important because I think so much of what I'm interested in your story is this the function of church as a culture, not just a cultural, but sort of a community based hub. You aren't. I mean, I grew up in church as well, uh, and there was a sense sometimes, and especially as I kind of come into adulthood, where sometimes ministry feels like it's separate from the way we live our lives,
Yeah.
and the function of church not necessarily linking up with your social conscience. And so what your ministry is about is, so, I mean, it's such a small church and such but a powerhouse. And some of what
Mm.
you have done with, I feel like we should just jump right into, because so
Let's
much
do it.
of Black Church Food Security Network is such a simple idea, but it, excuse me, it actually empowers and galvanizes the resources already in community to think broadly about what you could do to solve a really particular problem. So let's talk about the origin story of that project, because it seems so, again, like, in retrospect, I think that when people hear the idea, it's a light bulb moment, like, of course, land, of course. But what is that getting folks to buy into the power of what they have already is a tricky feat. So let's talk about that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think for those who don't know, the organization and the ministry and work is called the Black Church Food Security Network. And since 2015, we've been working with Black churches to organize their people, utilize their assets to grow food on land that they already own. And then also to connect with Black farmers to create this pipeline from soil to sanctuary, where we could essentially feed ourselves and support those who are producing our food in our community as well. And you're so right, Chef. So it's like, I've never pretend to go around like I'm a rocket scientist and I've come up with a brand new, never heard of. Like, that's not the truth. Like, it's like you said, it's like, of course we should do that. I really got pushed to do that though, in after experiencing something at our church, Pleasant Hope Baptist Church in Baltimore, where many of our members were being hospitalized for diet-related issues. And to be quite frank with you, I just got tired of just praying about it, crossing my fingers and hoping they make it. You know what I mean? I was like, listen, I respect the scriptures. I respect the encouragement to people who are hospitalized. And I love these folks so much that I want to do everything I can to help them in their time of need. And so initially, I was going to try to establish a partnership with the fresh food market across the street from where our church is located, but the pricing was just crazy and it just wasn't working. So I walked out, and when I walked out of there, I'm walking back to my church. I'm having a Holy Ghost hissy fit. I'm just completely just upset. And I had an epiphany before I hit the front door, like right near the front door of my church. There's a piece of land right there.
Mm-hmm.
And I walked past it hundreds of times and not thought about it, right? But in that moment, with divine discontent bubbling up in me, I said, listen, if we can't afford what they have, why not use what we already own and do for ourselves? And so that's what we started doing. That was 2010 when we started growing food on the land there at our church. And I the idea was powerful, but it was like I was grew up in Baltimore, right? So my roots are down south, but I don't have no green thumb like that, right? My roots are in North Carolina and Virginia, but I don't got no green thumb, right? And it was the seniors of the congregation that heard the vision of their young pastor with all his enthusiasm and said, let's go help that boy out. He don't know what he's doing. And one woman in particular, Maxine Nicholas, Sister Maxine Nicholas, she's an ancestor now, and she transitioned a couple of years ago, but she's from Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina. Grew up on the farm with multiple sisters and brothers working the land.
That's right.
And when I shared that vision, she was the one, and I'll speak her name for the rest of my life, because she took the vision and she turned 1,500 square feet in Baltimore City into a space for a Black land and food sovereignty. Now, she would never call it that, but what she was doing was resistance. What she was doing was communal self-determination. And she helped to grow food on that land. And also other members of the church got behind her leadership. 1,500 square feet. And Chef, she worked that land so that it was churning out 1,200 pounds of produce every year. On like a front yard, on a front yard.
Right.
Still blows my mind. And so basically what happened is I saw all the benefits of this garden at our church. We were not the first church, not even the
No.
first Black church to have a garden, right? It's probably, it's the underside of our history. It's there in the footnotes. We just are not introduced to those chapters. But I saw these benefits. The members of our church started reporting, improvements to their quality of health. They started sharing recipes back and forth. They started taking pride. You remember them old tracts back in the day that church folks used to pass out to people? Like
That's right.
collard greens and broccoli became our new tracts. We weren't passing out old school tracts. It was the broccoli that was bringing people to the space of all religious backgrounds, all spiritual identification. I mean, people from every stripe of life was coming to Pleasant Hope to connect with this powerful space. And that was 2010, right? And then in 2015, we launched the Black Church Food Security Network because I started getting this idea like, what would happen? Like seeing the results of our one church, what would happen if you could get multiple Black churches growing food, utilizing that church kitchen that sits underutilized or completely unutilized Monday through Saturday, utilizing that church bus, utilizing all that stuff you got in that building. And what if we created our own food system, or at least micro food systems in our communities, so that we weren't dependent on food charity all the time? Like we can't. How you gonna grow? How you gonna grow a people? How you gonna flourish? How you gonna prosper if we're completely dependent on benevolence and charity? I don't care how well-intentioned people are. We got to be able to do for ourselves. And so that's what the Black Church Food Security Network is all about. And there's an origin story there, but I've been talking long, and so I'm
No.
a Black Baptist preacher chef, so I gotta pause myself, or I'm gonna get
No,
3 points in a
everybody
hoop.
here, your life is beautiful. No, it's perfect. And it's exactly, I mean, it's exactly why I wanted to talk to you, because I think that this moment, especially, because there's also a point of that sort of origin story that is really centered in the unrest that was going on in Baltimore at the time as well. That part of it is really interesting to me, because it's like these moments of seeming upheaval, seeming strife, seeming just the sort of unrest, ultimately bring out solution-based, like solutions that really have to have been a reaction to in lots of ways, right? Like there's a complacency sometimes that we have when things seem or feel easy, seem or feel stable, and that little bit of unrest. I mean, sometimes it's divine intervention in some ways, but it's this sense that in those moments to shake things up, you get these solutions that are so revolutionary and really sort of paradigm shifting. And so I'm thinking about that point of shift that you experienced that really birthed the sort of formalization of this network. Because I'm thinking about it with reference to this moment, right? Like, I think a lot of people ask themselves, what should shift look like now? What pivot looks like? And this is an opportunity for us to really think more internally, community-wise, about what shifts could be. So can you just talk a little bit about that part of it? Because it goes back to your function of like the church not just being about your spiritual life, but sort of how that translates to your out in the world life, right? Like this, you see unrest in your city, a city that you grew up in, you love, you are such a part of, and in that moment of seeming tragedy and seeming like unrest, this beautiful network gets born.
Yeah. You're gonna make me cry. Thank you. I mean, you're so right that for a number of years, this coordinated food system was just an idea in my mind. Like, so after we started growing at our one church, the idea started to germinate, right? And it was just in my head for a minute, just rolling around. And I talked to a few people, like the dynamic Aaliyah Frazier. I bounced it off of her. She's a farmer here in the area and really known across the country. But I bounced it off of Aaliyah Frazier. And when Aaliyah, who was at that time connected with the Black Dirt Farm Collective, when she nodded her head to the idea, I was like, okay, we might be on to something. Because if Aaliyah say it's okay, right? Then I bounced it off another brother, Dario Harris, brother I went to Morgan State with, who's in the public health field. And he was like, yeah, that sounds like that might be something, right? And so hearing other people give affirmation to the idea was helpful, but it still wasn't enough to kind of push the birth of the idea into the world. But it was the Baltimore uprising that made me and made us say, okay, bump this. I was waiting for the perfect time and the perfect people and all the right money and all the right stuff. I was trying to wait for that right moment, right? But the Baltimore uprising said, listen, I don't know what moment you're waiting for, but now is the time to move this thing forward. The government backed up off of the black community here in the city. Nonprofits and foundations took a step back. Like all of the social supports, public transportation stopped running in certain neighborhoods for a couple of days. The school system shut down, Chef, for a couple of days as well, right? So it created this vacuum, and that vacuum was a space to say, all right, fine. If y'all gonna back up, we gonna lean in. And so we started to lean in, right? And so I called other churches. Aaliyah called farmers. We coordinated this thing together and started moving food from farmers into our community. Chef, I was driving our church bus around Baltimore, dropping food off on corners. People were calling our church asking for food because by that time it was our calling card. Right. And so that's how the Black Church Food Security Network was born. The moment, to your point, the moment pushed us to move forward, even if I didn't have all the check boxes checked in my head. Right. And, you know, I agree with you that this moment is doing the same thing in so many other people's minds as well. Like this particular moment, can you imagine what's being born right now? And so, in a sense, it feels like we feel right at home in the Black Church Food Security Network with all the demonstrations, the protests, the unrest. This feels right at home because we were born in something like this, right? But also, and I know you are a student of history, also when it comes to our history, there are other examples of dynamic things being created in the middle of unrest, or when there was a glitch in the system or in the matrix, where you had a window of opportunity, right? Where people were clear-eyed and clear-headed enough to consider a different way of being in the world. And so the Montgomery bus boycott was another one of those things where, absolutely. I mean, and you know this history better than me, that, you know, we get the approved version of what happened right through school. But I was an adult. Matter of fact, this was just maybe a handful of years ago when I was in Alabama at the Civil Rights Museum. And I went walking through the Civil Rights Museum, and I learned that churches got together with Black folk in the community. They started buying cars and buses, and they created their own transportation system. Then Mrs. Georgia Gilmore, as I'm speaking to the Mrs. Gilmore of our generation, like she was helping to fund and push the movement. Like, wasn't that dynamic? And so I know many people have said, like, what would have happened if we just stayed on that track? Like, we're going to push and we're going to make this system pay, and we're going to build up. So it's like deconstruct and construct. We're going to tear down over here, but we're going to build up over here, because we will need these kinds of systems far beyond this moment. And that's what really grabs my heart. Absolutely.
I'm also that through line about sort of the time pass, like generational baton pass, is something I'm really a lot about recently. I think sometimes I wonder a lot about, I'm thinking a lot about recently, what that disconnect between that era, right? Like that 381 days is a lot of commitment, right? Like you are committed, like the beginning origins of that boycott. I don't know if people were considering what that was going to really take, but it was people like Ms. Gilmore, it was people like the churches who had been organized and had understood the power of network, to sort of put safeguards in place and put sort of best practices in place that were replicatable around the country, but also sustainable, right? Like you have to feed people. You have to be able to get people moved from place to place. People still have to work. All those elements have to be thought about. And so I think about youth-led movements like Black Lives Matter. I think about, you know, especially places like Baltimore, Detroit, Oakland, these cities that have such a rich history in resistance and sort of activist work, really sort of always thinking about how you also make these movements sustainable. And it always comes back to making sure people are, their basic needs, who are engaged in resistance, their basic needs are taken care of. So food, spirit, like all those elements, right? Like those self-care elements we don't talk about, all sort of being tied together. So I was asking about, it's really important. And I wonder about what the disconnect is. Because it seems like there's a time where we think we're at some sort of mountaintop. Like we feel like we're at some sort of, and we really just at a summit, right? Like we really just at a moment where things seem a little better than they were, and you don't realize that this is forever work, right? Like in a lot of ways, the work that the Food Security Network does is really not just about a moment. It really is about how you feel and sort of supporting folks every day. And so if that work kind of continues in that spirit, then it sort of is there for you stable as like life ebbs and flows. And it's really a particular posture because it's not reactionary, right? It's like, how's your lifestyle? How is this a part of how we just engage the world? And so I find it's really interesting to think about it with reference to churches that are so much about how you live your life, that these are, like you said, you all are stable right now. You all, I mean, yes, I'm sure there are challenges in terms of adjusting, but I mean, y'all kind of built for this, right? Like you built for this sort of
the wisdom you just shared, if we just cut that out and put it on a loop, that's what we need right now. Like what you just said in that snippet, I would put in a boom box and walk around every demonstration around the country, because I really do believe. It reminds me, a couple of years ago, a good sister of mine, Renee Hatcher, out of Gary, Indiana. So I was talking to Renee and we was kind of vibing back and forth. And I remember sharing with her, I was saying, I really think that the revolution comes down to toilet paper and sweet potatoes. That's what I told her back then. I said, the revolution is toilet paper and sweet potatoes. In the spirit of what you just said, right? It was because, like, listen, if we can figure out how to have a sustainable program of meeting our own basic needs, it frees up so much more of our mind and our spirit and our creativity to create and do even more. And so, I mean, that ain't nothing new. I think the Black Panthers got hip to that in terms of basic needs. I think basic needs is the revolution, right? So many people go to jobs that they hate because they need the resources to get the basic needs met. So if we can come up with other ways to figure that out, and what I also know is that's not being reported, as we both know, in the mainstream corporate media right now, that in addition to these mass demonstrations, there are these other branches of it, right, around like child care cooperatives, food co-ops, like the zone in Seattle where they say this is a police-free zone. Like all of that kind of the energy helps to generate alternative ways of being in this world. But I really do agree that you're right, that sometimes we think we're at the peak because we got this legislation passed. And it's like, wait a minute, y'all. I'm not saying don't vote. I'm not saying, dismiss the legislation. Yeah, I'm just saying, like, I love how you said it. It's a summit. It's not the peak. And because the reality is, any law that they pass, they can repeal. Any policy that they institute, they can adjust and take the teeth out of it. So it's like, we got to have something that's independent of the reform path that helps us to care for ourselves in the ways that not only you and I will need, but our descendants to 1,000 generations will need. We always gonna need food, Chef. Wait a minute. Do people call you Chef? I just like calling you. Are you Chef?
Sometimes. I think the work I do a lot of times not in direct culinary spaces, so I think people don't really think about it. But I'm an everyday chef, so yeah.
You everyday chef? I just feel like, I don't know, it makes me feel proud. I'm talking to a chef right now. So I don't get this opportunity every day. But yeah, so it's like, I think that you're exactly right. And I think it's incumbent upon you and me and others who've kind of sat with this, right? Because as we know, we got a whole lot of people who this is their on-ramp. This is their awakening. And that shouldn't be minimized or dismissed. All of us have had an on-ramp and an awakening to some kind of struggle, right? And so I'll push back against those who are saying, where y'all been? Y'all just getting here. Like, just be happy. People are coming to the party. Like, take a breath and relax. So this is their on-ramp and for a lot of people. And I think that it's incumbent upon those of us who've kind of been in the space for a minute, who don't know
Yeah.
everything, but
Right.
have sat with some of this for a little bit to say, hey, let's think about toilet paper. Didn't you go buy toilet paper after Rona done shut everything down?
Yeah.
You didn't go to the mall. You went to get the toilet paper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so I think what you're saying there is so key, and also what you're saying is right. The Black Church Food Security Network, we are definitely, right on par with that. We have a Black Farmer directory on our website where
Yes.
we're trying to connect people directly with Black farmers.
Somebody asked about where you are. I mean, y'all is as far west as San Antonio. Y'all all the way up in
Yeah,
Providence. Like, it's this network is really to talk a little bit about what that connectivity looks like. I mean, you talked about movement
sure.
of product and what like sort of the physical network is, but it feels like something that should be like a plotted point really around the globe because it seems one that it's not beholden to. It certainly hubs itself the Black churches, but I feel like the connections you make with cross faith, cross space. It's really just about sort of how we replicate the empowerment of connection to our food
Yeah.
source. And I feel like it's such a wide community. So just like how is I feel like
Mm,
anything sustainable to my mind is person to person. And so you sort of see what was happening at Pleasant Hope, but then all of a sudden like it becomes this germ that gets sort of the seeds get sold all around the country. And I'm wondering what the buy-in for churches to sort of think about what they had, but also how has there been any pushback in terms of because I'm really sort of excited about this notion of bringing folks to that particular table across religious like you sort of take out the necessity of or specificity of a particular religion and more about using the power of these spaces that happen to be religious space to be necessary for the communities that they serve. Because you all don't just serve your congregation, right? Like
no.
this is sort of about being part of your community as like good citizens.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. In fact, I feel seen, and so thank you. um, you're seeing exactly what it is that we do. This is not a program to get you to walk down the aisle, shake my hand, and join the church in that
Right.
sense. But it is to honor the sacredness of connection that finds expression in Black churches and many other spaces as well.
That's right.
That expression that we witness in Black church spaces also comes along with um, assets that is communally stewarded by a group of folks over generations and over time. And so when you got a church that's 100 years old, think about the families that have stewarded that land and that building. Think about the community that has supported that church through hardship and struggle. Like for many of our communities, if there's nothing else that's pristine or built up or it's made or celebrated, like low income, rural, urban, whatever, we work hard to have this communal space. And yes, I'm the pastor, but I don't own the land. I don't own the building. I am not the king of the people. I am more so in accountable relationships with folks where I'm a steward. I am, oh, good heaven. I am expected to be a griot of this people that helps to remind the grandchildren about what their grandmother said because I was there working with her in the church. And I mean, so I can go on and on about that.
No.
But pastors, like many others, can be bridge people because we hold the stories and we're
Yes.
there in moments of great triumph and we're there in the sadness. I cried with you. We laugh together. We eat together. All the Mrs. Gilmores of all the churches that will never get a headline in nobody's paper. Like
That's right.
we are in community. And so in terms of that connection, that's for me, that's what comes to mind. And that's what makes it so powerful. So you're exactly right that there are other spaces where this happens. And I recognize that for Black folk in this landmass, this so-called United States, the Black church from the late 1700s to this very time has shown a sustainable strength and the ability to bounce back Even when our churches are burned down, our pastors are assassinated, church members are killed during Bible study, crosses are burned on the front yard. Like, think about all the 16th Street Baptist Church. Think about all the stuff that has happened over the years. And the black church just keeps bouncing back, bouncing back. And so what the sweet potato does is help us, and our Afropunk community will appreciate this, help to point us to a deeper spirituality that goes beyond the relics that adorn the walls of the buildings. Because it's not just about the sweet potato, it's about what it means. It's about that mac and cheese that we eat after church anniversary. It's not just about the ingredients of the cheese and the pasta and whatever else. I'm not a chef, so I don't know. But it's about what happens when you put it all together. And then when usually a big mama somewhere in the community breaks her foot off in it.
That's right.
Oh my God. And I just believe, Chef, that when we tap into that kind of energy, whether it's in a church or not, for us as a church, but I'm saying it can be in other spaces. But for us as a church, when we tap into that, I think we get reminded that we have more than what we need to do what need to be done.
That's right. That's
we
exactly
have
it. That's exactly it. And I guess that's again, like, there's so many reasons. I've wanted to chat with you since hearing your speech, and certainly want to take this opportunity to make people aware of the amazing work you guys are doing. But also, there's something empowering to my mind about feeling a sense of purpose in moments that seem or feel so chaotic. I mean, there's a lack of leadership right now, government-wise, in terms of what this moment is supposed to feel like, be like, how we move forward. And in a lot of things that we can't control, it feels like a calming effect. It feels like a empowering effect to know that there are spaces and places in sort of our lives we can really have real impact. I mean, I certainly know people can go and check out your plotted map of what churches and spaces are in community with your network. But I'm wondering about what the network is looking like and its function in the midst of COVID. I feel like that pivot has been really interesting for a lot of folks, and in some spaces has diminished or sort of halted work. But I'm wondering how you guys are sort of coping, what that's looking like in terms of this new form, and like how you all are just adjusting.
Yeah. So a great question. When this first hit, we really had to resist the urge to just stop moving and doing stuff. We worked hard, right? Just sit, think, get clear. There was a whole lot of anxious energy in the air. And there was a whole lot of do-gooderism that was just kind of like, let's go and save everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so we very intentionally was like, let's breathe, stretch, sit, and listen. And so while emergency food operations were popping up all around us, and so much of that was doing some good work, not all of it, but a lot of it was, in the right spirit. We just let that happen and just sat until we got to a place where we figured out that for us, this was an opportunity to be more of who we've always been. This was not a moment for us to jump on the emergency food, the kind of the charitable food bank bandwagons. That wasn't for us. And this is no shade to nobody who has participated. But going back to what I said a few moments ago, we were born in a moment like this as an organization. And so why leave our organizational identity in a moment that was so much like our crib? And so it was like, all right, so what do we do? Well, we're going to help churches to start gardens on their land, and we're going to help them expand their operations. This Friday for Juneteenth, we're sending money around the country. We're sending seed capital to churches around the country to establish or expand their gardens. We're calling it Faith, Food, and Freedom Summer. We're launching on Juneteenth. And for the
Mm.
95 days of summer, we're going to help even more churches grow food. We're going to help connect you with Black farmers all over the country. Our map, our Black farmer directory map, Chef, is growing so fast. This morning, we got an email from a farmer in Zimbabwe who said, "Here's my information. Can I be on y'all map?" I said, "Lord have mercy."
Yeah.
we heard from we heard from a church in Nigeria not too long ago, right? And so we're having churches start growing on the land that you own. Just real quick, why do we say the land that the church owns? Because gentrification, maybe. Like we see what's going on, and
That's right.
Black church land has more buffers against those kind of policies, and so that's where we grow. So grow food on church-owned land, patronize Black farmers, and emergency food preparedness. So what do we mean
Right.
by that? We're going back to mason jars and canning and, having workshops with seed saving,
Mm-hmm.
because think about this, right? If this virus hit again later this year, right? This virus and disease will be different in winter than it is now in spring. At
Right.
least we can go outside and ride the bike. At least the weather's nice. At least you can get around just a little bit, right? Imagine this in winter. Then we're going to have to be like
Yes.
our big mamas and them and have food in the pantry, have tomatoes
Yes.
in a mason jar. We're going to have to do that kind of work. And so we're excited on Juneteenth to be helping people across the country and churches to do that. The other thing we did, Chef, is we had a Saturday, a free Saturday series where people across the country could log onto our live stream. And we just had different classes every Saturday for a good 2 months, maybe 2.5 months, where we had farmers and horticulturalists, those in agroecology come on and just
Mhm.
teach a different thing each week. So we did, for example, a series in, what was it, May, called Grocery Store Gardening, because the
Okay.
grocery store was open. So which I try to be very pragmatic. We try to be very like think it all the way through. The
Mm-hmm.
grocery stores were still open even when the malls were closed. And so we started thinking about what are those things that people could buy from the grocery store that through asexual propagation they could grow at home and not have to go back to the store to buy it again. And so we
Mm-hmm.
had classes on onions and we did sweet potatoes and, all
Mm-hmm.
this stuff, lettuce. And we
Mm-hmm.
had people of all generations, right? All ages and generations, all different religious, spiritual background, all different, everything different. The beautiful mosaic of Black life was logging on Saturday morning and bringing their lettuce to the screen and say, "Hey, look, y'all, this is what I did."
I
And
love
it
it.
was it was
I
so
love it.
amazing seeing that. So those are some of the things that we did, and also what we're planning to do and launch this week. I got to drop some big news on you too before we end, but yeah,
Oh,
I'll stop
oh,
right there.
oh, come on, come on, come on. Look, okay. Breaking news. Um,
So yeah, I'll hold it.
yeah. I don't know. Well, now, okay, because there are two other things that I wanted to talk about really, because we getting close to the hour, and I want to be respectful of your time. Somebody now again, like I've been paying attention to comments. Someone was talking about the reparations bill,
hmm
and I didn't want we weren't I was not ignoring the question at all, and I just there's so much of Reverend Brown's story that is he just y'all can see just let Reverend Brown preach, and as you gonna be blessed. So I wanted to let you get those points across. I'm interested in. I mean, I don't know if you want to address that question about your thoughts on the bill and your thoughts on sort of because I mean, I think the reason that I was hesitant about well, just my thoughts around it start sort of center from just the way in which you talked about the work you do and the posture of it, right? That
Right,
it is absolutely a necessity to be engaged with and to have government and spaces be beholden to its citizens, and
right.
that's very real.
Yeah,
But in my opinion, it just feels like the real sustainable work happens when you are empowered by systems and practices that aren't beholden to the sort of I don't know fickleness of
yeah,
government. I don't know. I mean,
yeah,
so you are Baltimore, very very close to DC, just the sort of the hub of
yeah.
politics and all that. I'm wondering if you want to address that.
Sure. Someone typed the name of Reverend Vernon Johns when I was speaking
Mhm.
earlier, and similar to Mrs. Gilmore, he is overlooked for the role that he's played in not just the civil rights era, but the Black Power era as well, and the influence that he had. Another preacher similar to him was Reverend Albert Clegg of the Shrine of the Black
Mhm.
Madonna in Detroit. He's one of my favorites. And in fact, if I'm to be straight up, he laid out the program for the Black Church Food Security Network in the 70s. In the 60s and 70s, he was talking about this. So I just dug into the crates and put some 2020 seasoning on it, really 2015 at the time of our launch seasoning on it. That's all we did. Well, one of the things that Reverend Clegg said, he said, nothing is more sacred than the liberation of Black people. Nothing is more sacred than the liberation of Black people. And so for me, when I hear encouragement around HR 40, um, and I've been following even back in the days when Congressman John Conyers was putting
Mhm.
HR 40 in every year, right? And so really grateful for the many activists who've been pushing. I got to just speak the name of Queen Mother Moore. I got to speak the names of
Mhm.
organizations like In Cobra. I got to speak, like they've been on the grind for years and are deserving of, amazing respect in that regard. If I believe that nothing is more sacred than the liberation of Black people, then I believe that any avenue of any meaningful avenue of engagement is worthy of energy and attention. And so for the
Mhm.
person who's posting about HR 40, respect, love, and thank you for that passion. We need that fire so that future generations can follow in the footsteps of these sacred ancestors and organizations that have done this work. And I believe that it's important for every person to find the sweet spot of their genius and bend their
Mhm.
passion in the space that aligns with, as you said, their purpose. So what I realized, actually, and I realized this around the Baltimore uprising of 2015, what I realized was legislative advocacy is something that I can do. It is on my resume and I've done it, but it's not uh, Katie Geneva Cannon, Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon, great ancestor, said you have to do the work that your soul must have. And legislative
Mhm.
advocacy is not the work that my soul must have. And even as I acknowledge that, I'm not saying your soul can't have it. I'm not saying that your soul is not contributing to the work of my soul. It's just that if I'm to be true to who the Creator has formed and fashioned me to be, and if I'm going to help you out the way that I can help you, you don't want me going down to do HR 40 work or whatever. I'm not picking on HR 40.
No, no, I know.
But
Yes.
that's just not the lane that you want me in. You also don't want me making a sweet potato pie, even though I can grow sweet potatoes, right? So everybody got to know where their lane is.
That's right. That's right.
so,
That's one of the
so
biggest things. Yeah. Because,
yeah.
everybody has an issue, right? Like, even in the church I grew up in, Reverend John T. Tebow of Good Neighbor Baptist Church.
Wait a minute. No, no, no. Stop. Stop. I know the time is on us. But did you say John Tebow?
Yes.
Do
That was my
you
pastor.
know that that man, bless his memory, has been family with my parents grew up with him. My dad and them grew up with
Wow.
John Tebow. They all grew up together, and he was one
Okay.
of my and is one of my preaching role models to this day. And that man could sing and hoop like nobody's business.
Yes, 'cause he was at Good Neighbor Baptist Church, literally two
Good
doors from
neighbor.
my house, like two doors on the Hattiesburg Avenue side. And when he moved churches, we moved with him. But it's I mentioned him just because he talked a lot about people sort of finding their ministry and like that everything's not doesn't have to be for you. Like you if you can't sing, you don't need to be on the choir. Like there are other ministries for you. But that you can find what your gifts are, and I think that that's one of the things I just meant earlier, wanting you to talk a little bit about sort of how you pivoted, because I just feel like this moment really is an opportunity for folks to figure out what their gifts are and how they
Yeah.
can be of service, because it feels so often like being of service in even small ways, it changed your posture, change even in the midst of something about your message yesterday as well, like about the the appearance of resources, the appearance of like your ability, doesn't have to be discounted because it doesn't look grand or huge or
Right.
big sweeping movements. It's like what you with your capacity to give and to be of service. It should be and could be anything. And if that posture changes how you, I don't know, the expression of God, but just the expression of goodness into the world. I don't know, Chef
Yeah.
Brown. I mean, Reverend Brown is. I
Did
feel
you
like
call
you
me a
got.
chef? Oh my Lord, I've got
No,
promoted.
I feel like you have it in you. I feel like any good cook, any good chef is thoughtful. Are thoughtful. Um,
Mm,
we got about 10 minutes left, and I want to. I know there's
sure.
another conference happening around 12:30, and I want people to have a little bit of a breather. But um, there's something else that I was really impacted by around your ministry. Um, and it's something that is really dear to my heart, and I think a lot about. But um, your Freedom School is
Yeah.
a part that I'm really fascinated by, and it really is. I mean, it draws on all of the brilliance and sort of resources of your parishioners and like community members who have gifts to share with your young people. And it seems something that is scalable in the same way the Food Security Network is, and it seems so necessary right now. But if you could just talk a little bit about the sort of origin of that, of your Freedom School, and just what that looks like in terms of practice, because it's just so interesting to me.
Sure, yeah. So very quickly, I'll say that when I first was called to pastor the Pleasant Hope Baptist Church, soon after arriving there, maybe a couple of years or so, I began to notice that our Sunday school program began to wane and started to wilt a little bit. And so basically, I had to repot it. I had to bring it some fresh soil in a new pot and help it to grow again. And the idea that I started to think about as I critiqued Sunday school, being a Sunday school graduate myself, was that while it did a great job of introducing Bible stories, it was lacking in the way of helping me to understand myself as an African person in this world. And so what I wanted to see what could happen if you bring the spiritual formation together with racial self-esteem and cultural identification. Put
Mm-hmm.
that in together in a form that churches could recognize and embrace, right? And so that's how Freedom School came to be in a nutshell. And now, yeah, it's an African-centered youth educational program that really starts off in a different place than what some other programs for our young people offer, especially when they're led by folks not from our community, where we assume from jump that our children are genius. And it is our job to help nurture and cultivate their genius so that the fullness of what the Creator has placed in them not only nourishes them, but also nourishes their wider community as well. And so we really do believe, like somebody didn't just walk out, find like a fruit tree and pick a Martin King or a Malcolm X off of it, or a Rosa Parks or a Sojourner Truth. Like, you, Rosa Parks was groomed by somebody.
That's right. That's right.
Yara Santaway was groomed by somebody. Betty Shabazz was groomed. And so what I wanted to think about was, what could it look like if we engaged the idea of Sunday school with the understanding that we were grooming the next generation of change makers? And so that's what we do at Orita's Cross. Orita is a West African Yoruba word, which means where the ways come together. And so
Mm-hmm.
on, pre-corona, when public school was closed, like on those professional development days, we would
Yeah,
snatch all them up, change the church into a school, and
that's
Freedom
right.
School would be born right there in the church, utilizing the same kitchen, the same church bus, the same land. And they would joke with me in Freedom School, and they sometimes still do. They call me Miss Frizzle. You remember the Magic School Bus? we we
Yeah.
we would load children up on the church bus, and I would drive them around Baltimore, pulling over on corners, saying, "Here is what happened here, and here is who you need to know." And
That's
so they
right.
was calling me Pastor Frizzle for that. But yeah, so I think I am passionate by this idea that Marcus Garvey and Malcolm X and so many others put forward in terms of a nation within a nation. And I and
Mm-hmm.
I want to do my part. I can't do everything, but I want to imagine what it would be like if we, back to what you said earlier, could create systemic institutional responses to the basic needs that we have as a community, and then take off from there. What we
Yeah.
know is you got to have something for your children. We got to have our children to have the kind of education, because while the buildings were integrated with all deliberate speed after Brown v. Board, the
Yeah.
curriculum didn't change.
Nope.
So the curriculum that was being used to prop up white identity in white children was the same curriculum that our children was exposed to, and people far brighter than me, Asa Hilliard and so many more, have written extensively about the damage, Naeem Akbar, Marimba Ani, about the damage that occurs when you're trying to download a curriculum into the brain of a child that was never intended to cultivate their genius. You're going to
That's
get me
fair.
talking right there again, Chef. I got to let that alone. But I'm grateful that at Pleasant Hope, you have a space where a food network and a freedom school
Yes.
has been nurtured. And I can only hope and pray that as many pastors as possible, as many churches as possible, also see, and I know so many are already doing this, but so many
Mm-hmm.
more I want to invite to the party,
That's
is
right.
seeing your church as a important, powerful ground for the creation of an alternative way of being, and not just a space that reinforces the status quo, where we shout on Sunday and are oppressed Monday through Saturday and are convinced that if we just are faithful and believe in Jesus, then after we die, then we're going to get a piece of the pie. No, I kind of want some pie right now. I don't know what the table going to look like after here. I'm going to leave that to God. But while I'm here, I want a piece of the pie, and I want my people. I want my children. I want my wife. I want my community. I want us all to feel feel that feeling of feeding and nourishing and loving on each other in that way.
That's right. That's right. So many words, so many
I got to tell you something big though, Chef.
Yes, I'm
Can I
about to say
tell?
I need
I
to
got to
move.
tell
I
you.
need to move.
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
got to tell you something big, and I have to ask you something big. To tell you something
Sure.
big is this campaign that we're launching on Juneteenth. Y'all follow Black Church FSN, please. We have
Please.
denominations lining up. The Church of God in Christ has come
Ooh.
alongside the campaign. The African Methodist Episcopal Church, 3rd District in Ohio, Bishop Frank Reed has come alongside the campaign. We got mega churches like Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas. This is
Okay.
huge, y'all. This is
Right.
going to be a historic coming together of the Black church community, and we're trying to steer people in the direction of Black farmers, of Black food sovereignty and land sovereignty. And if you don't go to church every Sunday, don't feel like this is not for you. If you eat, this is for you. And there's space here somewhere. Now, the big
Oh,
question I have, though, Chef, and maybe
yes.
in light of the time, we got to kind of chop it up a little later,
No,
but
no.
I want to know how chefs can connect. My brain, like my knowledge of the world and universe of the chef is very limited. I'm just on the eating side of things, right? But I have
No.
learned that that community is a very powerful one. And I just don't know how the community of chefs who are on the same wavelength can connect to this work over here. So that's what I
We
don't know.
gonna talk. No, we gonna talk offline because this is seriously the work we're doing. This is seriously the work that we are thinking about now. It's
Um,
one of the reasons I've gone to a Black Farmers Conference every year, because it's this sense of this blind spot sometimes that we don't necessarily think about in terms of um, this amazing work that's happening in this space that feels so insular. I think that the work we do in this moment, especially, is so interesting because so many chefs and so much of the food world is slowing down. And that
mm,
moment of pivot, it is the perfect opportunity to now think more broadly about the function we serve. And we're gonna talk, but there's absolutely a piece that we have to play, and it could be brilliant. I feel like we're very close, and we've gotten to go a little over the hour recently, so we're not gonna get cut off. But I just thank you so much for the work you do. Thank you
mm.
for being an example. So just let everybody know just where they can, because and maybe that's a good finishing. Um, folks who have heard your voice today, who are, I'm sure in the comments, but also in their spirits, are just excited and empowered and want to do something, want to be involved, want to help out. What does support look like for your network in terms of just folks who come across the dopeness of your work? What can people follow, and what can they do to help?
Yeah, I think the first thing, somebody said it, they're looking for their lane and their purpose. And so I just want to just extend just support and good energy in those directions as you find the
Mhm.
space that aligns with your genius. And if you find or have energy and interest in supporting us, go to our website, blackchurchfoodsecurity.net. We love your financial support. That financial support, as I said a little earlier, we are passing on to churches across the country. We're putting it behind farmers. We buy directly from farmers. And so we love your partnership in that way. We got folks who committed to give $5 a month to the Black Church Food Security Network.
Mhm.
And listen, these days, as a pastor who respects the offering time, I'm so thankful for every single gesture of support in that way. The other thing you can do, though, is there are some churches that perhaps some of you, these viewers, are connected to, and just begin the conversation. Send this live to your pastor, to your bishop, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't necessarily have to be that your church or the churches you're connected to join us. It ain't even about that. I ain't trying to be nobody pope or nothing like that. But I
No,
am
no.
trying to at least plant the seed that might be helpful to the church, because you're not doing mass gatherings under the roof no more. So what can ministry look like going forward? That's what I want to offer there. And then for any others, you say, I'm not church affiliated, I'm not this, I'm not that. It's cool. You got a congregation somewhere, though. You saying, what you mean? I'm not a pastor, but you got a congregation. Everybody got a circle of influence. And so I would just ask you to have these conversations with your folk. Start growing food, y'all. Toilet paper
That's
and
right.
sweet potatoes. I promise you that this is what it is right now. And so you can do that. Last thing, 'cause I'm gonna get in trouble. Follow us in all the social media stuff. So we on
That's
Twitter,
right. That's
Facebook,
right.
and
Follow and like.
Instagram.
That's
Black
right.
Church FSN on Instagram and on Twitter, and on
Yeah.
Facebook, Black Church Food Security Network. Or you can email us at info@blackchurchfoodsecurity.net. I really appreciate it.
That's perfect. Perfect way to end. I just appreciate you so
Mm.
much. And we are definitely going to talk because, yes. Right
We
now,
have to. Somebody said you the plug. Somebody said you are the plug. And so, and I see you, Lady Thomas. That's my cousin down there too. All my chef cousins, help a brother
that's it.
out. We got to do something big right now.
Yes. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you so much for this. And I
Thank
appreciate
you.
you. Yes, we will be in touch. We will talk later on today, probably.
Let's do it.
Um,
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this.
Awesome. Thank you, Afropunk, as well.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, y'all. This is so dope. Later on today, over on Black Food Folks, 3 p.m. is the really brilliant chef Azrae Spellamy of the Blondery, in conversation with Paula Velez, who's a brilliant pastry chef at Kith and Kin. So just going over to follow Black Food Folks if you're not already, but please also Dr. Heber Brown, Pleasant Hope Baptist Church. And the Black Church Food Security Network. The work they're doing is so important and beautiful, and it's replicatable. So just go on over, check out what they're doing, follow, and support. And thank y'all. And next week, I have the brilliant Dr. Monica White out of Detroit. We're going to be talking about her book, Freedom Farmers and the Legacy of Black Farming. So thank y'all. Another week done, and I'll see you guys next week.